Emerson walked into the jail and paid his whole tax.
Oh, he paid the poll tax. Oh my God.
Yeah, so Thoreau was happy to make his point, but Emerson actually many times helped him along. And his little hut he lived in next to Walden Pond, Emerson, it was on Emerson's land. Emerson made sure he wasn't going to starve. There was, you know.
Wow.
So Emerson was great.
Are you still teaching?
No.
She's storytelling about her.
The story of Thoreau.
She's storytelling about her friend.
She's a docent at Concord.
On if you're still
Now I'm gonna have to make
the
docent at Concord.
Oh, wow.
That's right.
That is so great, Rose Anne.
Phenomenal.
So did you go lay on the ley lines next door? On the what? The ley lines? There's the first tower ley lines.
Come back to the show that never ends. Come inside. Have a seat. Patrick, you have a new line for church someday. Come in, have a seat. Come to the show that never ends.
I'm going to do it this Sunday. Come in, everyone. You're live to the show that never ends.
And I think
Rita's
you're
like,
Except you have to say, stay out, but enjoy the show that never
Doors
ends.
are always
well, those are signs inside.
Doors are metaphorical, and our doors have never been closed.
Well, I guess you got cured of TB.
Yeah, he did.
You got sort of TB, did you say?
Cured of it.
Oh, cured.
The TB went away.
In any of his journals, did he write anything about his sickness, or did it ever come in, like, spiritually speaking, did he ever talk about it? Do you know?
I don't know that. From what I've read, and I have not read his journal, so I don't know if he discussed his healing. I guess sometimes TB becomes regressive and just heals totally, or he lived to be a very old man. Actually, he had a little Alzheimer's in his last couple years.
But it doesn't seem as though because we're talking about, his TB, his medical condition, and because we are at spiritual mind treatment where it's about healing. I don't think that connection was made with Thoreau at that point in time, right?
With Emerson.
I'm sorry, with Emerson. I'm so into Thoreau.
Because
Emerson.
that's when you get into Phineas Quimby
Right.
and talk about physical healings.
Yeah.
So no, that's why Emerson isn't 100% of what what's his name, Ernie wrote about. What's his name? That other guy.
Wants to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, but then you think about it, that he went there specifically in his mind to heal when he got on that ship. And he went over there and all of that, it seemed like he had an intention. And it probably, obviously, it worked for him. He just didn't have a formula or a method or anything. He just goes, I'm going to go somewhere beautiful and meet my sorrow, meet my sadness. It's beautiful.
Well, also, didn't we say at the beginning that Ernest took that one thing, our thoughts go somewhere and something happens, or whatever it was they said at the beginning? So I don't know, who knows? Maybe it's just take a little further investigation to really know. Yeah.
So let's talk about transcendentalism in America. And Emerson and his other friends got together and established their own club so they could share their ideas and beliefs. They didn't really like the term transcendentalism, but it sort of stuck with them. They had the belief that the individual could transcend the physical world into spirituality by simple, what? Intuition, going within. The belief everything in our world is a microcosm of the universe. They accepted the idea of the oversoul, a supreme mind that every man and woman share. And certainly they were influenced by the German philosophers and Hindu philosophies, and they were starting to learn more about Hinduism at that time period in the late 1700s, in early 1800s.
Can I ask you a question? Why is it called transcendentalism? Why is it called transcendentalism?
Well, because I think Kant, he talked about the transcendentalism. He used the term. So transcending what's in front of you, but knowing that this is something, but there's something beyond. Before this happened, there was a spirit behind it. There was a thought behind it. So understanding that we don't live in a purely material world.
Hello, could you go back again?
Yeah.
To that other one. So what does that mean to you, transcend the world by simple intuition? I guess I'm not following that part about the intuition there.
Well, by simple intuition is, I think, what we teach, is that you go within. It's your intuition. It's not just a quick judgment that you make. Oh, yeah, it's like going within, meditating, connecting with the spirit that's working in and through each of us at all times. And so what they called simple intuition is what we would talk about as a meditative state, going within, listening to the God self within.
Right, and our definition of intuition, or Ernest Holmes, is intuition is God knowing itself within us. It's us knowing that we're God. It's God knowing itself through us, in us, and we can tap into that any time. So it makes total sense to me. Yes, Patrick? Yeah. Yeah, people, it's not a hunch. Intuition's actually God knowing itself in us. Like you just know. Jesus had intuition. He just knew.
I think you could see that if you were a brand new student, wanted to learn something, jumping into Emerson might be a little too much right in the beginning. You need to go through some of those other basic courses before you go into these people who influenced our way of thinking. Margaret Fuller, she was designated the first editor of their journal, The Dial, and the Dial published many controversial ideas at their time, including, now would any of these be controversial here? The ineffectiveness of traditional Christianity, the nature of God, their anti-slavery position, their support of Native American rights, their support of women's rights. Margaret Fuller, she was pretty amazing. A New York newspaper claimed she was the best read person, male or female, in New England. She was a close friend of Waldo, visited Concord often, stayed in their house, in their home for weeks at a time. Yeah, these are people that don't come over for dinner and go home. Traveling was hard. You went and you stayed for a while. She was the first woman ever allowed to walk into and use the Harvard Library. Now, that must have been at least 1830, 1840 when she could walk in and use a library. Her writings were an inspiration for Susan B. Anthony and the women's suffrage movement. So she went to Europe, met her husband, met a man, they married, they had a son, they came back, and there was this horrible shipwreck right in sight of New York City, right off a little island off of New Jersey, and it was ridiculous how horrible. It should not have happened. and all three of them died. So, back to Emerson, there is one mind common to all individual men. Every man, woman is my statement, is an inlet to the same and to all of the same. What Plato has thought, he may think. What a saint has felt, he may feel. What at any time has befallen any man, he can understand. Oh, this is a little bit about social justice that he wrote at the time. Now, because we're a religious organization, and I'm using his words, so I'm not inferring that anything called a conservative party today is what he's talking about. The Conservative Party in 1840, 1850, whatever, composed of the most moderate, able, and cultivated part of the population, is timid and merely defensive of property. It vindicates no right, aspires to no real good, brands no crime, proposes no generous policy, does not build, nor write, nor cherish the arts, nor foster religion, nor establish schools, nor encourage science, nor emancipate the slave, nor befriend the poor, or the Indian, or the immigrant.
We're still talking about it. I know. I mean, we have a few moments here and there, but
Nearly 200 years later, what are we discussing? And I have to mention, Emerson wrote President Andrew Jackson, and I read this years ago, so I don't remember exactly the years, but whenever he was president, do y'all know when he was president? 1830s or something like that. There was something called the Trail of Tears. We've all heard of the Trail of Tears. And Jackson was the one behind shoving all of the Native Americans from the South, Georgia, wherever, all of the states, shoving them out west. And Emerson, if you're interested, you could probably find a copy of this letter. He was so passionate, telling Jackson that this was the most unchristian thing that he could ever do, that these people had a right to live where their forefathers were buried and where they had lived for hundreds of years. I mean, Emerson was active. He was out there doing what he could do, which meant writing letters, because, back then he couldn't have marched on the White House, I think. So, in Emerson's words about nature, the universe is represented in every one of its particles. Everything is made of one hidden stuff. The world globes itself in a drop of dew. The true doctrine of omnipresence is that God appears with all his parts in every moss and cobweb. How cunningly nature hides every wrinkle of her inconceivable antiquity under roses and violets and morning dew.
Can we go back for a minute? Because that's like so.
Of course.
There's a Rumi quote that
Whoops.
yeah, the drop in the ocean. I was just thinking, and the whole idea that we teach in our thing is that the universal is it's God is in everything in its totality. It's like the wave in the ocean. There's not like a part of the wave that isn't the ocean. I can see where, yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's our whole teaching.
Yes, but why does wrinkle have to be a she?
Yeah, he never refers to women very often. Isn't that interesting?
I think the
I
her
know.
there is nature. I think nature has
Mother
always,
Nature.
yeah, Mother Nature, that's why. I was just being.
Yeah, the creation of 1,000 forests is in one acorn.
That's exactly.
Creative process.
So
Very beautiful. So such truth. Quotes on character. These are different quotes. People do not seem to realize that their opinion of the world is also a confession of their character.
OMG, that's great.
The meaning of good and bad, of better and worse, is simply, is it helping or hurting? What you do thunders above your head so loudly I cannot hear the words you speak. The mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions.
That is interesting because other people have said that same exact quote. Is he actually the one that actually said it? Because I can't think of the names now, but there's two other people that, Einstein's one of them, and the other one, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Very moody Emerson.
No, he's pre-Einstein, so maybe Einstein stole it from him.
Well, yeah, because
But I've heard that quote.
Einstein's 100 years later. Well, I do know that the famous Rob Jones used to tell me, stretch your rubber band, honey, stretch your rubber band. It will never go back in the same size. So what he was trying to describe to me when I didn't want to do something that I just didn't, the mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions.
It's put to hit to Ralph Waldo. The mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Rob Waldo?
Sir.
Well. Okay, now this one, I'm sure none of us have ever thought this. Why should the way I feel depend on the thoughts in someone else's head?
Oh, no victims.
I hate that when I find myself doing that still. And I catch myself and I recognize it and I'm like, I want to let that one go someday.
And he took it also, Oliver Wendell.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
But he was after.
Okay, I was thinking of Oliver Wendell Holmes. That said the thing about the mind stretch.
And there was a guy named Sherlock too, wasn't there? That was pretty famous.
Oh, him. Yeah.
On fear and regret, write it on your heart that every day is the best day in the year. He is rich who owns the day, and no one owns the day who allows it to be invaded with fret and anxiety.
Oh, that's so great. We need that today for sure.
We're going to get this whole thing right.
It's her slides.
Are we going to get this whole thing?
Oh, would you like it?
Yeah.
I can send it, sure.
Don't fret.
But it will come in a PowerPoint way.
We usually send them the slides. You can just send them to me and then I'll send them to her.
Can you
Yes.
reduce it into another way, or do
They
you
all-
all have
sometimes-
PowerPoint?
No, that
When you print it, I print it out and I just put it, so it makes it print out when, it is a page.
I've been sending them the slides
Okay.
ever since we've been in class. So.
Finish every day and be done with it.
You've done what you could.
You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. Begin it well and serenely, with too high a spirit to be cumbered with your old nonsense. This new day is too dear with its hopes and invitations to waste a moment on the yesterdays. Did he learn his lessons from all of his grieving, all of his the hard times in his life?
Yeah.
So, this is a family portrait. On the left, Emerson with his son, Edward. Of course, we know Waldo died at 5.
He named his daughter Ellen as the first wife.
Mm.
That's cool.
Yes, you're right. And with the whole group. Now, Waldo and his wife, see the woman that has like sort of the net over her head? And of course, he's older, so he's standing next to the door and she's standing next to him. So the children and grandchildren at their Concord home. Love. Love is a perfume. You cannot pour unto others without getting a few drops on yourself. Love is a perfume you cannot pour unto others without getting a few drops on yourself.
Patrick wants to.
I just want to say, can you imagine the way he writes, but can you imagine sitting down and having like dinner with him?
Oh.
I mean, I don't know if he talked like that. I'm sure he didn't talk like that. I mean, like when they're having dinner, pass the potatoes, but and do a whole poetry thing on it. But I have a feeling that he must have been just, how could you not be in awe of a man who wrote like that and sit with him at dinner or out on the porch or whatever?
I suspect, having read enough about him, he would invite you in, be all friendly and warm, and he would look at you and say, so tell me, what are you thinking about today? What are your dreams? He is not, I don't think he was going to lecture. I think he was going to want to hear your ideas. So there's his home today. He lived in it for all those years.
Didn't look like that then, for sure.
No. It's been repaired and freshly painted, and lots of visitors go there. But Louisa May Alcott had this memory, so it's a quote from her. In 1872, there was a fire in the middle of the night. And she ran down from her house, which was a block or two, maybe a couple blocks away. When Emerson's library was burning at Concord, I went to him as he stood with a firelight on his strong, sweet face and endeavored to express my sympathy for the loss of his most valued possessions, his books, his writings. But he answered cheerily, never mind, Louisa. See what a beautiful blaze they make? We will enjoy that now.
Had so much loss in his life. I mean, you know what I mean? He had a different perspective on everything after having the amount of loss, somebody having that amount of loss in their life. I mean, look at Ruth, our Ruth. Mm-hmm. She's had all that loss in her life. I don't know if you know much of her history, but she's lost just about every person. And she has this wisdom and this gratitude for life. I can imagine her saying something like that, if something happened to her. So maybe that's what touches me about it.
Yeah, I agree. Another quote. It's one of my favorite ones. Be silly, be honest, be kind.
I have that in my card in my bathroom, and I didn't know you wrote that.
He wrote so many things, and actually I have these little bookmarks I'm going to give you with some of his quotes. This one I did for my husband. He hasn't ever seen this one. The age of a woman doesn't mean a thing. The best tunes are played on the oldest fiddles.
Okay, yes.
Stradivarius.
Well, Dan, those are supposed to drop the mic.
The end.
This is perfect.
This is the end slide. He would be amazed if he saw the internet with his quotes all in these, flying all over. Flying all over. So, any thoughts, questions, comments?
So, thank you.
So, do you feel like Waldo is a friend now?
They should go over anything on the essays. But they might want something that captured them.
I've really always really liked him because he was part of the transcendentalist movement at that time with David. I'm more in tune with Thoreau's because of my readings, but I just had no idea how the effect that he had on Thoreau, as I can see that he had a lot of the initial transcendentalist movement sayings, right? His ideas were big ideas for that time that is still so current today. We're still dealing with it. So if I had a person that I would want to have sit with me for dinner, it would be this man. You've really brought him out again, and I thank you for that.
Oh,
Really.
good. I'm so glad. You'll have to fight with all of us because we all want to invite him for dinner, I think.
Well, that's okay, because isn't it like a drop in the ocean or ocean in a drop or something like that? You know, it's always going to be with each of us.
Yes.
That would be a really good
Can I read some
play.
quotes that I liked from
Yes.
Self-Reliance? Okay, infancy conforms to nobody, all conform to it.
Infancy?
Yeah, I mean, a baby's not going to conform. You have to conform to the baby. I don't want to expiate, but to live. My life is not an apology, but a life. It is for itself. Love that. My life should be unique, an alms, a battle, a conquest, a medicine. What I must do is all that concerns me, not what people think. Prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view. It is the soliloquy of a beholding and jubilant soul. It is the Spirit of God pronouncing his works good. Prayer to effect a private ends, to effect a private end, is theft and meanness. Prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view. It is the soliloquy of a beholding and jubilant soul. It is the Spirit of God pronouncing his works good. Prayer to effect a private end is theft and meanness. As soon as a man is at one with God, he will not beg. Another source of false prayers are our regrets. And this, I think, was kind of interesting. He who travels to be amused, or to get somewhat which does not carry. Wait. He who travels to be amused, or to get what which he does not carry, travels away from himself and grows old, even in youth among old things. He travels away from himself and grows old, even in youth among old things. So, and then this we're talking about conformity. Society is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. The virtue is in conformity. Whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. Anyway, I just thought. Wanted to say something?
No.
You did a lot of.
Well, yeah, no, I do. No. What I do want to say is that I'm looking at the differences and the similarities, right? Because that's what we're doing with Emerson and Ernest Holmes. So there are a lot of similarities, as we can see. But I find that one of the differences is that I really don't think, and there's been no evidence in the two essays that I saw that says that he went as far as into healing as the later part of like Quimby and all the rest. I think he was really looking at life from the point of view of God's self. Yes, I agree to that. As spirit, I agree with that. And he was well read into the Hindu and the Buddhism books, as I can see, and used a lot of those mindsets. And I don't know exactly where. That's what I was looking for, is the areas where they really became like Veda for some reason. VEDA became very was a lot of his thinking and thoughts, and probably into his writings. But that's what I wanted to say. That's where I see the big difference is that he really didn't go into that. He was really more about the God within, and that we were one. Well, there's oneness in all beings, whether it was inanimate or animate things.
I'm not sure who said it, but I remember reading that what they said about him, this person, it was actually written somewhere, that he spent his time, it was more the internal process of all the God self, that all that whole thing, like an esoteric, he didn't take it down to the practical level. Right? That's, I think he was a philosopher. Yeah. And so where our faith, the science of mind, takes the philosophy and brings it into practicality is what Ernest Holmes did, and others after that. But I think he was a philosopher. And that's great. We need philosophers.
Well, I think this time, even being able to not, the times that we've taught at the time we've been in it, all these years, what I got from this is that, in a way, what he did is, I think everyone's saying, is that he allowed us to see first cause. And that's that love, that's that power. And I really believe, because when I was listening to the whole thing, I felt this kind of this healing energy that came from the words, from his thought process, from his, I don't know, it just all felt that incredible first cause that he's talking about, love. He's talking about love and this incredible energy. But he never went, like you're saying, into the healing, but I think it happened automatically. And I mean, obviously not with his family, but I'm just saying that during that time, a lot of people were passing away and dying. So it's just interesting, because now I see why they talk about him as love. Isn't this the one, Rita? Where they talk about Emerson as love? He's the love, and Troward is the law. And so that's what, love leads the way, and the law makes it so. And he definitely is that power of love. So he was kind of the igniter of how, because the stuff he's talking about is what we actually heal with. That's the actual first cause. That's the love is the only thing that heals. So he actually is. Look at the way we felt when we would hear quotes tonight. Look how our body kind of had a resonance that was so like, I would hear us all go, oh, that's healing energy. Healing energy. Okay.
That's great.
I just really like his face. He looks like a really nice guy, like he has a good sense of humor. He just looks like a really friendly, wonderful person. He does.
Yeah, look behind you. There's a person who has no
He thinks
sense
he's
of humor
reincarnated.
behind you.
And he's talking about the rubber band. So, so Rita, does anybody have any? We're going to actually leave early tonight, but so I know. But there's a couple things that Rita want to go over before Ron. Well fed.
Very, very simply put,
like he was on the train was on the track, but he got off a couple of stations before, it got to like Quimby and those guys. So the train didn't go all the way. So, the train that he was on could only go so far, and that's where it stopped. And then the other guys got on the train. They built the track to go a little bit further using what they got from him. So, I mean, it's all, it's just all built on each other. Like, he took it as far as he could go with where he was from and what he was gleaning. And then the other guys picked it up and go, oh, you know what? If we take this, like you said, love leads the way, and the law makes it happen. So, he just led the way. He was like, yeah, well, this is what it's going to be. Like, love is the deal. And then they grabbed it and go, okay, what if we take the power of love, the energy of love, what can we do with that? And then when they experimented with it, they're like, boom. Because, love makes it happen. The energy of love makes a lot of things happen.
Well, that's what's interesting. That's what's interesting that we were talking about Martin Luther King when he said he went to the mountaintop. I was talking on Sunday, and that he said, I looked down and saw the promised land, and then he's looking out. But now he said, it doesn't matter if I get there or not. I've done my job. I've taken you to this place. And this is where we now are going to continue on. That's what we're talking about, why this class is so valuable about the spirits in rebellion, because, and by doing, we've been paneling all week these incredible ministers, 18 of them, and we've been hearing their talks and their stuff, and you can see where they've got that energy that we have right in this room, that one, like, where are we going next? What's the next one? And that's where we're stepping into. Yes?
The only thing I wanted to add was that from Emerson, I got that he didn't really need to go there. That wasn't his practical application. He talked a lot about living, like we should live, like you should live your life, live. And so I think for him, it wasn't more of a science. It was more of a philosophy of life. And we live in the soul. We live, like everything comes from within. There is this God within us that we need to trust, and that when we live from there, everything can happen. So for him, I think that's all it was necessary. There wasn't any drive to go further than that.
And it was probably a little better too, because he wasn't overthinking it. He was just actually living it and saying, and when he saw all the death around him, as you talked about that death and the death of your son, you finally stop resisting death. You stop resisting it and stop feeling bad about it and sad about it. But you feel your feelings, but you finally go, wow, my son was here, and the woman I love, and so much. I have to admit, the jumping in the casket thing, that kind of threw the room. All of a sudden, everybody's like, I love Emerson. Ew. What do we do? I'm a little weirded out right now. But there is, and even that, he probably had no apologies for, because Rose Anne knew him.
He never talked to me about any apologies for anything. And I think because of all of his loss, that's why he could say, yes, live every day. Don't regret what you did yesterday. Be in this moment. And we all have, I think, at least I still am working on that, unless y'all have it perfected. But
well, we did get that in last class, but no, I was kidding. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, what? Yeah, we're gonna. Rita, are you gonna be out so we can tell them next week?
And that's because it's giving her time to do whatever she needs to do. No, but because of the transcendental living like Thoreau did in Walden, their deal was not only live life, but live a simple life. And work and live, because he was for the regular man. He was not about the aristocrats or the church authority. You know, self-reliance is about not going through church authority to know God, right? And so he says, live simply. But in addition to that, he also said that that we have to live in the present moment. We cannot go back into those days as you had it in your thing. Do not go back on your past. Do not go into the future. You live in the present moment. Live simply, work and live simply. And that to me is just transcendentalism.
Beautiful. So 2 things before we get you out a little earlier than we've ever been, but let's just do one thing. Roseanne, just so you made it just like, it's just so, it was so, I felt like we were just sitting around, I said like talking about our family, old friends. It felt like an old friend time. Right. Right. It was calm. It was just wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's an easy subject to feel that way about.
When you-
Some of the others, I won't name names, but some of the others would be a little more difficult to be.
Troward.
Speaking of him. Yeah.
Troward, yes. And then the second thing before Rita gives you your booklet of your reading for next. No, she will. Actually, this is something I'm going to tell you that I actually read, and I said, oh my God, we've got to give the first 21 pages. And we actually tried to get the book, but the book's not in print anymore. But one thing I want to do so we don't forget it, speaking of love and Emerson and everything, there is a special, special birthday that's occurring tomorrow by this woman, Mary Alcott. Give it up for Mary Alcott. No, I'm just kidding. AKA. But Sue's birthday is tomorrow, so I thought we'd sing happy birthday to her. What do you think? Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sue. Happy birthday to you.
This is part of our lineage, and it's not really usually anything we would have taught in this class or anything, and we're not going to, but we want you to read this because it's part of our lineage. We come from Ernest Holmes to Robert Bitzer to David Walker to James Mellon to us. So we're like really only four names away from Ernest Holmes. But this reading comes from Robert Bitzer, who was like a badass. I mean, he did not mince words. How many took the power of decision? Most of you, yeah. I think all of you, yeah. Okay, so he's like Raymond Charles Barker. He just early 1900s. Okay, he was a contemporary of Ernest Holmes. I'm saying early 1900s. Actually, he ran the Hollywood Church. He was one of the first ministers that Ernest Holmes sent out. But the reason we wanted you to read this because he gives a really good history of New Thought that's really we think was interesting, and some little nuggets in there of things that you wouldn't know about Ernest Holmes, and the beginning of the movement. And when it was first getting started. So what I'm talking about is when Ernest Holmes was first getting started. No, it's not stapled. So just read it, and before we start Phineas next week, we'll just kind of just bring us something that enchanted you about him, or interested you, or something that, yeah, and that kind of struck you, something you maybe didn't know that surprised you. Yeah, please make sure to read it. And I think you'll find it really interesting. It's a really good history. Yes.
No, I just want to say, when we were reading it, Rita and I have been taking Bitzer essays, and we do a morning thing. We read it's like a page and a half. We read the essay, and then we discuss it. And then she goes into her world, and I go into my world. But it's kind of how we start after you feed the cats, just to give you a little insight into our home. Bitzer, Bitzer. But I was thinking of all these people, and we're reading it, and I went, who are all these people that were a part of this? And when you read it, you go, wow, it was like a whole world going on with this. And because I had heard a few of the names, but even more than what we are talking about here, there was a whole group of the Transcendentalists that were coming in, we went, wow. And then you'll learn a few things, I think, about Ernest Holmes that is just hysterical. I mean, they were just so solid on this thing. Remember the one where they go? No, don't tell them. It's not a, no, don't.
Take the mic, Rita, take the mic.
Here you go.
Let them read it so they can make their own opinion.
I want to tell them the
So,
ending.
I mean, I can tell that you're really enjoying this. And one of the things that all the ministers that we met with, because they basically in their ministerial class went very deeply into Emerson, very deeply into Troward, and they just like actually loved Troward. It was like amazing to hear them talking about Troward. Like, did you see any of their videos? You can go, I think they're all on Facebook. Ask Michelle when you see her. But they had to do a video off of all these people. And they just did it on their own. Like the group would come together, they'd do the video, and then they get it graded by James. But some of them were like, the one on Troward's hysterical. I think they're worth looking at. But Michelle will let us know where they are. I know I found them on Facebook. They're on Facebook. They're probably all on her page. What was I going to say? But one of the things that struck me was how important they felt that it was for them to have these, to go into the roots of our science, to really actually acknowledge that it came from somewhere, that it wasn't just picked out of the air, that there's like a solid like heritage beneath us, and everybody's wanting to rush ahead to the next thing. And yeah, we do. We love Joe Dispenza, we love Greg Braden, we love all these people, and this is like the next step. Is like making, because they're just saying the same thing. It's like what you were saying. There's just an evolution that they're putting the next track down for us. But it's so important to know where we came from. You know, it really assists us to know that we're coming from something really, really strong and something that's really solid. We might not have all taken it on and used it like we could have, but we can now, right? So. One of the things that was interesting, somebody said, where was that? I don't know, but it was Dr. Jim Lockhart. He said that this Church of Religious Science, Centers for Spiritual Living, hasn't really grown since the 80s. It's kind of flatlined. And we were like, why? Why has it flatlined? And so it's a good question to ask, and what do we need to do to expand it because it has, and one of the things the younger kids in the group, they were younger, they're probably about your age, said, your kids, the children, said was that we need to make it more, we need to make the language, which we know, you're not going to give a millennial Ernest Holmes and expect them to really embrace it in that way, just the normal person, I mean, when we're studying, you go to school and there's something, you study all that stuff. So it was the idea of making it, I feel like that Patrick and I are really working on doing that, at least when we give talks on Sunday to tie it all together. So the way to get it to the next level is to start bridging it to the more current. And also the most important thing, and a lot of ministers don't do this, we do, but that you bring everything to life. Like you don't ignore something that's happening in the world, and you have to bring the science to it. Like, what's this about? Why did this happen? Let's talk about cause and effect. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that, and just really work it that way and to make it current. So that's what that we work towards. Right.
Because some of these words, I mean, that's the reason why we had a short study group, is because, well, what does law of mind? What is that? What is universal spirit? I mean, just the words used, but we want to know it. I want to know it from the science of mind point of view.
Right, yeah. And so,
Gina, I just want to say, because Gina, she's still online? So Gina's online, and her children, well, they're getting older now. They sit, if you've ever been, when we were all here at that time, they sit together, and they're young. I mean, Gina's young, the same, and her kids, and they sit there and really, really take that in, and that's a real compliment to the science and to Rita and I guess, on a Sunday, to say, We have to make it accessible. We have to bring our own lives into it. And that's what people want to know. They want to know, how do you bring God? There's another part that they say that they don't really like the word God because it turns people off, and they don't want to hear that. But you can't leave God out of it either. You can't leave spirit out of this. You got to power, but we don't want to change. You don't change principle in order to be cool with the millenniums or anybody else. So I think where we're at is taking this, because they want to know, how do I take this power that you say and how do I work it into my life? And he's saying, by forgetting about yesterday and living it fully today. And no, and that's it. So I'm just saying that Emerson may be whatever, doesn't, he's way back there, but he's right here.
What does Joe Dispenza say? His whole thing was like letting go of the past, right, and living your future. I mean, it's the same message. So it's really exciting to me. I just get all excited.
What is our final project? Should we be thinking about that?
I think we told you what it is.
Well, she wants to hear it again.
All right. Well, I'd have to
But-
go look up.
oh, well,
I'd have to
but-
go look it up. I don't know. Yeah, we did the first class. It's a 5-minute talk on healing.
On healing,
It's a
yes.
It's a 5-minute talk on healing based on everything you learned on this class.
5 minutes, all in 5 minutes. But before we do that, I think we should have Roseanne treat out, yes. Anybody else have anything that's rolling? It was so good to see you, Jamie. Bring you out of the camera and into the room. And Phineas. That's when we're going to start the healing. The healing's going to start. And Peggy is going to, as we learned last week, we're going to do a Phineas, and she's going to faint and drop to the ground like you did with the evangelist that we talked about. She's going to go, Phineas Kumbia! And we'll all catch her. Okay, anything else? Thank you, you guys. This has been a wonderful evening. Roseanne, once again, mahalo times. So she's going to close us out. Yes, she is.
Well, standing here knowing the truth that we are all one, united together in this one spirit, in this one truth, in this one love, and in this whole process, which is called the show that never ends. And as each of us goes home and into our lives and thinking about the future, I know that Waldo and his message of living each moment, living each day, letting go of the past, letting go of the blunders, letting go of the mistakes. Just be alive in that moment. And I know that this is been wonderful moments, one after another. So blessings to each person as they leave this space and go on and on in the show that never ends. And so it is.
Gina, is Gina still on? Gina, we have these handouts. Thank you. Handouts, and so we'll arrange a time. Also, I want to, And Charles, we need you to come get yours, and we'll do it. But also, Gina, we'll also call you because we want to talk about the kids. It's so nice to have you on camera, so we can save a text. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
And tell us when you're coming, whoever listens to this tape, so that we can be here to give you this, because we're in panels all week. And
We can even put it on the door if we're in the panel. Okay.
This is just fun reading.
Yes, it's just fun reading.
And then we're reading, I want to get clear on homework. I mean, what we're doing is
read it and come back with whatever.
Just this.
Yeah, just read that.